Hello everybody, Decaf here. Today I want to start a little bit of a new series, sort of going over the other things that we need to deal with when making models for YSFlight. So today we're going to start talking about the DAT file. We're not going to get through all of the DAT file, there's a lot of things in here. But in front of me I have two different examples. For a civilian with the 737 DAT file that I'm working on, and a new DAT file that just came out for a model, the Standard by CMG, which will show off some nice things between the military and civilian DAT differences. So let's start off with the very top, and we'll just work our way down. Now, we'll see how far we get today. So let's start off with the first lines here. In both of these we have a REM line, R-E-M, in caps. Not exactly sure what not caps will do when you're setting up this, but let's just keep it in DAT. Let's just keep it in caps, and we should be okay. So the first few lines you can put REM there and put some notes in. So for the 737, I just briefly say, all right, who's this by originally, and then who's done the edits, who's crediting this. So for the Southwest Airlines, I credit Martin's in here with the tail, and I don't go into a whole lot of detail about who did what and everything like that, but just some of the big ones. So if I took the decals from Martin and transferred it over, I'd definitely credit him heavily here, just as an example. Or you could just put the aircraft name here up top like CMG did. But putting the aircraft name up top is a little bit redundant, but it's not a big deal. The next line, the identify, specifies what the name of this is going to appear in YSFlight. So let's open up a version of YSFlight that I got that loads quickly, and just to show you what I mean by this, CMG. Alright, there we go. So this is this aircraft right here. Pretty nice aircraft. We YSFlight were really excited to see this. It was really interesting. Everyone's struggling to get it to work, and we finally got it working, so we're all happy. This right here, this line in the menu where you can select your aircraft, is what this is right here. Now you notice that you got a little underscore there that appeared where we have a space. That's okay. It doesn't matter if you have a space or an underscore. YSFlight understands what you're trying to say. And this next option here, category attacker, or over here we have category normal. This helps us with some controls and how responsive the aircraft is. And this is where it comes from. With all these different categories, you can select acrobatic, attacker, fighter, utility, all those sorts of things. Utility is typically reserved for helicopters and things like that. But yeah, that's the categories. So if you're searching for an aircraft, you can limit it down to, oh, let's just look at bombers, and you'll just look at those. But I have a suspicion that it also helps with the handling. Okay, so categories. Then we get into the engine performance section here. And we have a few different options here, and it differs between what you're trying to do. Sometimes you won't need all of these lines, and other times you will need them. So first off, we have the afterburner question. Does this have an afterburner? Well, this attacker aircraft does not have an afterburner, so we put false. And the 737 most certainly does not have an afterburner, so it's false as well. If you had something like an F-15 or some fighter jet with an afterburner, then you'd put true there. So that's a true-false question. And then we start to get into some variables where we need to input some data. This is all about engine performance and general aircraft weights to help set up the aircraft. So first thing, afterburner, thrust at afterburner. How much thrust are we getting at afterburner? If you don't know that, you're going to want to do some research. If you do know that, great. One of the websites that I like to do to help identify information for this section is jet-engine.net. I'll put a link in the description down below, along with these two DAT files, so you can see them. So yeah, here we can select a whole bunch of different things. As you can see, I've been looking at the military and civilian specifications. So let's just go ahead and take a look at some of the military ones. And let's do a search for the F-18. But as I've learned, it likes the full name. So there we go, F-18. So there's a few different options here. And it really it all goes back to what engine we're running on. You could go with just the classic, or you could go with a slightly upgraded version, or you could go with the Super Hornet down here. But this gives us a whole bunch of information over here that we really don't need for YSFlight. Well, it might be very interesting. We really only need the first 4 columns. So what are the first 4 columns? So let's scroll up. Here we have the thrust, both the dry and wet, meaning dry thrust is at military power, the maximum it can produce without an afterburner, and then wet thrust is the maximum thrust that it can produce with afterburner. And then we have SFC, wet and dry. SFC stands for specific fuel consumption, which is a ratio of pounds of fuel, the thrust that you're producing, and the time. So we want to multiply some of these numbers together. And what we do is we match up the specific fuel consumptions for the dry thrust and the dry SFC, multiply those together if the units match up. So that's one thing that's really nice about this website, is it's all in pounds. So it's one constant unit, where we have pounds force for thrust, and then we just multiply that by the SFC to give us the number of pounds of fuel consumed in an hour of operation, operating continuously at the maximum dry thrust. That is what, it's pretty close to what YSFlight wants. What YSFlight wants is how much is this consuming per second. So what we do is we just take the number that we get from multiplying the thrust times the SFC, and we divide by 3,600, which is the number of seconds in an hour. I'll put a link in the description showing you how to do that, and from a little topic from YSFlight headquarters. So let's go down, back, find our F-18s again. There we go. So we'd multiply this number right here by this number here to get the dry thrust per hour. So the fuel consumption is down here in these last two. This is the fuel with afterburner engaged and fuel consumption at military power. Pretty self-explanatory. One thing you'll notice here is that the units are a little bit wacky. If you look at both of mine, I have pounds, kilograms, and tons over here, and tons and kilograms over here. Tons, kilograms, and pounds are the 3 units that YSFlight will recognize here. So if you want to convert around and things like that, go ahead, so you can get a constant unit, but you don't have to. So you can put everything in pounds and it'll be absolutely fine. So we sort of skipped over a little bit here, which is the weights. This is pretty self-explanatory if you look at the little notes here, the clean weight, the weight of the fuel, and the weight of the payload. Clean weight is a little bit hard to find, that information. So what I do is just figure out, or estimate, guesstimate, whatever you want to do, what the weight of the aircraft would be without the fuel or the payload. For the civilian aircraft, payload is a little bit tricky to find, if impossible. What I just do is say how many passengers can this hold, multiply that by about 300 pounds, give or take. It averages out probably to about what you want to do. So that's this first section up here. There's one last thing, and that is the thrust reverser. If you have a thrust reverser, this will show you how much thrust is given. This is a dry thrust, so it's a ratio of this number right here, 0.76, is multiplied to your military thrust, and that's how much thrust you can produce in the reverser. Pretty straightforward. So I think we'll go through the next section and then call it for today. We'll go through the other things in other videos. So this next section is really all about the basic positioning. And the first things are asking, well, where is the cockpit? This isn't asking where does the cockpit file go or anything like that. What this is asking for is where does the pilot's head sit? So this is a camera position. And we can specify more camera positions, as you can see over here. But for one military aircraft, you might just say, oh, I just need an in-cockpit camera view, and that'll be fine. So you just define where the pilot's head would be. And this will take a little bit of trial and error to figure out where this needs to go. Especially if you have a physical model of a pilot in there. Sometimes if you don't position it right, you can get some weird shading and visible pieces of the pilot's head. So play around with it, figure out the front and back, where does this need to go, and you should be okay. So in order to set up a camera outside of the cockpit pilot camera, we need to use X camera. X camera lets us define a whole bunch of things. First, we have to define the name, so we put that in quotation marks. Then we define its position, and then we give it, is this at an angle, and then is it inside or outside the aircraft. Inside or outside will help specify what is visible, because certain things when you're in the cockpit view aren't visible. One example would be the engine turbines spinning. If you have that animation, something like that might not work. So this is not X, Y, and Z. It's a little bit different. X is over here. Z is this middle coordinate, and Y is the first coordinate here. You might be wondering, well, why is that? It's got to do with the way the models are set up in terms of how YSFlight reads them. It's a little bit weird, but we can deal with that. So we can specify a whole bunch of different things here. So in the 737 we have the pilot, co-pilot, a jump seat. I put this jump seat in just so you could see all of the instrument panels that I spent a lot of time working on. Then there's a tail thing for the top of the tail, left wing and right wing. And you can see the angles on the left wing and right wing just to help specify where you're looking at. The angles are measured from looking forward and measured counterclockwise. So looking out the left wing, I want to look 90 degrees out that way. If I'm looking out the right wing, that's 270 degrees, because I have to go from dead ahead all the way behind to the right. These next three things are fairly straightforward. This is asking where the landing gear is when it's touching the ground, or where it should be touching the ground. So if we go ahead and, well, no, I won't need to open up Blender. This is wherever the bottom of the wheels are. That's the best way to describe it. So even if you have even like a World War II airplane where the tail even would be really, really low and touching the ground in the back, you can define that. Pretty straightforward. And that would be with the wheel position. the wheel gear. Left and right gear are your main left and right landing gear. And that's that. I'm not exactly sure how multi-gear ones work, but you can figure that out pretty easily by going and looking at the DAT file for a 747 or something like that. I'd recommend getting Task Force 58's 747 paints and taking a look at those DAT files. So that's pretty much the premier 747 model in YSFlight. The next thing that we have is the Arrestor. We don't have that in the civilian model, but we do have that in the military model. The Arrestor is where our arresting hook is going to be. So if you look at an F-18 or some other naval aircraft, you have the Arrestor hook. Where does that come down? Where does that touch the deck? So that takes a little bit of figuring out. Next we have the machine gun. By default, all aircraft will have this line there. You can position your machine gun. So if you have two machine guns on both sides, you can have two machine gun ports. And then you can set the interval. And is there a gun sight? So if you want to have a gun sight, you will just say true. If not, false. Or you just don't have that in there. For the civilian aircraft here, machine gun 000, and we don't arm it. What I mean by arming is later on you'll see a section where we start loading up weaponries and things like that, and you'll load a machine gun. In the civilian DAT file, you just don't do that. In the military one, you do that. The next one we have is smoke generation. So smoke generation you can use for acrobatic displays, or if you're doing a civilian aircraft, you could have it being the contrails coming out of the engines. You could set it to be at the wingtips for some acrobatic displays like the Russian Knights or something like that, with wingtip smoke sidewinders or smoke winders. You can have as many smoke generation spots as you want. The one thing you can't do here is set the color. You have to set the color in YSFlight. Next we have vapor positions, vapor 1 and vapor 2. Pretty straightforward, as it says here, and you have the wings swept back, like in F-14. Where is this position going to be? Is it spread forward? Where is it going to be? So if you have a civilian aircraft or a military aircraft where the wings aren't moving, then you don't need to have any difference between the two. Just have the same coordinates for both 0 and 1. Next and last is the hit radius. So if you've ever had military combat in YSFlight on the servers or something like that, you have tried to hit somebody, and it can be challenging. So where am I actually going to hit them? How much am I going to hit them with? And so this just defines a sphere radius for how far out it should go. Typically you don't want it to go too far past outside the plane, otherwise you're just increasing the target area to whoever's trying to shoot you down. The last thing I want to talk about today is this strength. This determines how much damage you can take, how many missile hits, how many gun hits, that sort of stuff. If you want an invincible plane, you increase this number a lot. If you want to make the plane as strong as paper in terms of what can hit, then you put a lower number. So it takes a little fiddle around to figure out what's realistic and stuff like that. So that's really trial by experiment. So I hope this video was helpful. If you have questions, go to YSFlight headquarters or Google search YSFlight headquarters DAT variables, and you could get a link to the whole compilation. If not, I'll put it in the description anyway, just to be helpful. If you're not a member of YSFlight headquarters, you speak English, which would make sense if you're listening to this. I hope you will consider joining us. We have a lot of fun. You can get some help if you need it, or you can use the resources that we have to start making aircraft or modifying them. So I hope this was useful. good luck making your DAT files, and as always, happy modding.